Hey guys, thanks for joining us this week. To help us grow, please like and subscribe. Enjoy the show. Welcome to the Athlete Hustle podcast. I'm your host, Jason Chin. Today's guest is Brad Dayman. Brad is the owner of Elite Athlete Training Systems. Brad is a Westside Barbell special strength certified coach. Now, this is important because I'm a big Westside fan, and that's how I got to sort of know of Brad right off the bat. So I really started following his stuff because I was doing Westside in my way, and he was doing Westside in his way, and that's what really got me interested in it. So I found Brad in 2016 thereabouts, and I started following him, and he's been blowing up ever since. So so welcome to the show, dude.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, man. I'm excited to be here. Always love to talk shop.
Yeah, man, it's good. It's good. So before we get into the show, dude, could you just give us a quick rundown on like who you are, and then how you sort of ended up in sort of the strength and conditioning world?
Yeah, absolutely. So Brad Dayman, I own Elite Athlete Training Systems here in Canada, a town called Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. I played football growing up, like American style football. When that ended for me after high school, I was looking for a sport to kind of compete in, find that way to vent that competitiveness. I ended up powerlifting competitively and still coaching the high school team here out in Spruce Grove. The kids on the team would see me lifting pre-practice, and they'd be like, "Oh, can you teach me to squat? Can you teach me to bench?" Da, da, da. And really at the time, I didn't want to do any of that. I just wanted to do my training. But I had one kid in particular, Zach, who just wouldn't leave me alone. And so I said, fine, I'll show you how to squat. And he instantly, he picked it up, and it was just this really cool dynamic. I kind of realized, hey, this is what I want to do. I want to teach people how to lift weights. And Zach actually ended up becoming, he's in physio school right now. He followed a path down his career. That was a really cool thing. But yeah, that's what got me into the industry. From there, I would work for free. I would train anyone that wanted to train and get stronger, just to kind of hone my craft. I did that for about 2 years. I went to school at a school called NATE, which is kind of like a trade school here in Canada. Or we would call it like a community college, I guess. Mm-hmm. Did like a personal trainer cert there, got my Westside Barbell certification. Started working out of a YMCA type multi-use facility here in town as a personal trainer for 2 years. And through that, I would just, every paycheck I got, I would save my money, buy equipment. And 2 years after that, I opened what is now Eats. That would have been about 5 years ago, and we've been rolling ever since. It's been a great journey.
Yeah, hectic, dude. That's it's a good feeling when you actually, and someone's interested in what you're interested in. You put some effort into them, you see them develop, and then
Mm-hmm.
it's good. I mean, and you do. I think when you sort of get down to it, some part of it's just like you are helping out these kids, and it's a good feeling,
Absolutely, yeah. That's I saw Pete Dupuis, he works with Eric Cressy in America, and he's a big influence of mine. And he shared something. There was a post, something to the effect of, "Parents don't love us because we teach their kids how to squat. They love us because we're a leadership facility masquerading as a strength and conditioning facility." You know what I mean? So it's always been more than just squatting. That's just the vehicle that we use to get through to them, right?
I love that, and that's why, actually, when you say that, it sort of brings up, one thing that the little parents ask me to try to help their kids with when they come into the gym isn't to get them faster. It might be initially or something, but
Mm-hmm.
it always ends up, could you get them to start eating their vegetables? Could you
Yeah.
could you get them
Yeah.
to help in the house and stuff like that? It's not.
Yeah. Yeah. Can you teach them life lessons? Can you help them grow? Yeah, absolutely. For
Right,
sure.
that's such a good point. So actually on that point, you mentioned one of your influences. Could you, lay out a few more people that kind of influenced you throughout the years?
Yeah, for sure. When I first got into the strength conditioning world, Louis Simmons was definitely my biggest influence. Westside Barbell founder, owner, guru. I also had Kelly Starrett. I had bought his book, and I was kind of diving into it. I would say those two are my biggest influences. As I've gone on through the industry, I picked up a lot of coaches. I have like Zach Evanesh is someone I look up to. He owns a gym in New Jersey, Underground Strength. Joe DeFranco is a big name in the football strength conditioning world. He's owned many private facilities. I think he's in Texas now. I'm not 100% sure. Stret, Louis have always maintained their place in my hierarchy. Who else? I really like the FRC system that Dr. Spina is putting out. I know I've met with a lot of coaches that use that system. That's something I'm looking to get certified in the future for sure. Eric Cressy, Pete Dupuis, Andrew Locke, who's out in Australia. I met him at Swiss last year, 2 years ago now, and brilliant physio and just a really cool guy to talk to.
We actually, we've interviewed him a couple of weeks ago, actually.
Yeah, I saw a clip you had him on there. That's really cool. Yeah.
Yeah, he's a cool dude, man.
He's the biggest man I've ever seen. I've seen some big dudes. He is wide.
A big boy, man. I tell you
he's
what.
turning sideways to go through double doors. Like, it's nuts, bro.
He's an absolute big, but he's as big as he is. That's as big as his knowledge base, man. I do.
Absolutely, yeah.
Man, yeah. He just but then he can lay it out. You know, he can lay it out for people like me to understand.
And the thing I really love about him is I think certificates and degrees are great, but I really think a coach should have that under the bar experience. So if I'm going to go see a physio, I want my physio to bench 600 pounds. Like that's what I want to do. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I have a ton of respect for him.
That's kind of what we talked about. It's like, you know, what do you want to look for in your physio? And your physio should be able to, you know, squat, bench, dead kind of deal. Like, or you know, more optimally is just they should be doing the sport that you're doing. Yeah. You know, that'd be the best physio you could find. But, you know, I don't know, like sometimes it's hard to find a physio that does powerlifting or you know, weightlifting or some of these more sort of maybe sports are a little bit more nuanced, I suppose, you know.
Yeah, it's definitely tough. But I've no matter where I go, I find that there's qualified professionals everywhere. So if that's something that someone is struggling with, it's a matter of reaching out, you know, find the coaches that you do trust, whether it's a strength coach or maybe it's a massage therapist or whoever that is, right? Just reach out and see who they would refer to, because usually that's the best way to kind of navigate those systems for sure.
Yeah, 100%, man. And if you can't find a physio that, you know, is idealistic for you, it's still best to see the physio than not. Because at the end of the day, they are probably going to be able to fix you. It's just when you see someone who's actually doing what you do, they've got a great understanding. There's a good chance of maybe even had what you've got and they've fixed it in the past. It's just a little bit more efficient that way is probably the takeaway from that.
Yeah, for sure.
What would you say some of the big takeaways from a couple of the coaches you admire the most? Like, what have you sort of learned from those guys?
So when I first started, I was very, very West Side. Like everything had to be a dynamic day, a max day, it had to be barbell based, power lifts, just working under the assumption that like, if we get stronger, we get better. And that's not an entirely false statement. I think there's truth to that. I just kind of grew from that as my starting point, but that was definitely like what Louis brought to me was the idea that, you know, let's make strength the foundation. Like if a strong athlete can do a lot of things, like that checks a lot of boxes, right? But then from Starrett, I also found that, you know, we're going to tax the body in the gym. And as a strength coach, it's not my job to diagnose or fix injuries. But as far as the mobility goes, I want you to feel as good as when you got to the gym or better when you leave, right? So Starrett really gave me the system to kind of do that through his Supple Leopard book, the first edition back then. I've read the second as well. But he kind of gave me the framework to do that. And then through guys like Joe DeFranco, Zach Evanesh, I've learned a ton of like business lessons, even more so than gym lessons, because they're private gym owners that have done what I'm trying to do, right? So a lot of business lessons from them. And then Dr. Spina is kind of, I'm still, like I said, still trying to learn his system, but he's kind of opened my eyes to, I think Starrett's model is great, but we're missing a big part of the picture if that's all we're considering, right? So it's cool to see how you can kind of trace back through the history as a coach and realize, I took this from this coach and this from that coach, and you can kind of piece it all together into what we now call the EATS method.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that thing will never stop evolving, I guess. That's also
never. Yeah.
That's also
absolutely.
the deal, right? And I love that, man. That's good. I saw Starrett, and to this day, I still haven't really. I mean, I listen to some of his stuff, like some of his stretches I sort of see pop up, but I haven't really actually given him probably the props he deserves, because I feel like maybe he was propped up too much as a sort of a guy for CrossFit back in the day. And because of that, maybe I was just like, he's just trying to, sell another stretcher or something like that. And I'm like, what's this guy know? But he probably knows quite a lot. This sounds like.
Yeah, I think he gets a lot of flack, especially when he first started out, because I think CrossFit kind of attached to him based on how he tells the story. But yeah, he was synonymous with CrossFit early in his career, and CrossFit got a lot of hate. Rightfully so. I think there were some people doing a really bad job of it, but I do think it's a cool sport that you can do and excel at and be healthy doing with the appropriate coaching. But
100%.
Just his involvement with that got him a bad name for whatever reason. A lot of people chose not to listen to him. And I think like his personality is kind of, he's confident in what he knows and he'll tell you that. And I think that's fine, but that can be off-putting to some people.
That's actually maybe what it is too, because he almost comes off as a bit gimmicky.
Yeah,
almost.
I've heard that before.
Maybe that's the thing. And then, and going back to the CrossFit thing, I always say that CrossFit, CrossFit isn't a chain. It's not like they give out, a process on how to do everything, and then all CrossFit boxes are the same. They are so much different as far as you going to each gym, and each gym has like a startup process where it might be a real crawl before you can walk, before you can run kind of deal, so they'll really ease you in and teach you everything very slowly and very methodically. And then other times it's going to be like you just straight into running. They'll throw you in the deep end right off the bat, and those tend to be not the best gyms, because although there's some merit to sort of throwing someone in the deep end, but when you're trying to get someone to do 50 snatches or whatever, it's like it's a recipe for disaster. When you got someone who could have all these underlying weaknesses, and the snatch is a complex exercise, so it's just like how do you
have this new person do it under fatigue while they're breathing heavy? Last thing they do, it's not gonna. There were even CrossFit gyms that would wear shirts like "I got rhabdo," like they're bragging about rhabdomyolysis and stuff. And I'm like,
what's that?
That's not something good.
What's rhabdomyolysis?
That's I'm not a doctor, but it's something to do with like when your muscle starts eating itself, so that it can get the protein out of there to help you survive.
So they go into atrophy. So is this something that kind of happens more like readily, like more like instantly, like because you're just going through this hectic training session? And
I think like I said, I'm not an expert on it, but I think it sets in pretty immediately when you overtrain to a certain extent. And then it's like, I watched it, there was a documentary on CBC years ago about it that I had watched, and it like people end up in the hospital, some people died from it. And it's purely just because you're pushing too hard too frequently, and if you would just back down a bit, then you can avoid it. Like it's a lot harder to get rhabdo than it is to avoid, as far as my understanding. You know what I mean? Like you got to really try to get it.
Yeah, of course. Fuck me, that's not. It's not something I'll be putting on my shit. That's for damn sure.
It's not a good look for a gym, that's for sure.
No, man. So but at the end of the day, I still respect CrossFit quite a lot. I think it's a great sport. We have
those athletes are crazy too. They're beasts.
You can't take that away from them, bro. Like no matter what, they're just that good. They are, And it's like we have like CrossFit regionals here in Australia, in my hometown, where we are right now, next door to my house in the stadium, and and it's like for New Zealand, for China, for India, for basically the Asia Pacific, and they all come into Wollongong and they do the CrossFit regional, and then they to sort of move them on to the next level the CrossFit Games basically. And I went
right next door to you?
Yeah, bro. Which is nuts. You just like the population of Wollongong, just where we are right now, just gets way more jacked. It's just crazy. It's just like, and then
really cool.
Oh yeah, it's cool, man. So we go and watch, and it's good, man. They're just, you can't take anything away from them, man. I can see these guys like, I'm more of a weightlifter kind of guy, and these guys like will be clean and jerking like close to my max, like just like after like and it just doesn't hurt him because it's fucking shits me. So
no, they're beasts.
Shits me to no end. Imagine some bitch coming up and squatting close to your max while they're doing a WOD. No, sir. Why don't you go fuck yourself out with that?
Especially now that I'm like 2 years removed from powerlifting and not nearly as strong as I used to be. Like these, you say they're clean and jerk your mag. They clean and jerk my deadlift sometimes. Shit, man. They get strong.
Yeah, they're strong, man. So, what could you give our audience? Because a part of our audience is they're athletes, and could you just give them a quick rundown on why strength and conditioning is important to an athlete.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think I can't remember if it was on your podcast, but it was Andrew Locke was talking about it, and he talked about like the benefits of bone density improvements in resistance training, and Spina talks about the importance of laying tissue the proper directions, and so that you can apply the proper stimulus to it and not be injured in your sport. I think strength conditioning really lays the groundwork for young athletes to do that stuff. I don't think it's the only way to do it. Like I love dance and gymnastics and like martial arts. If we're talking really young, like under 10-year-old kids, I think those are great methods to teach those things. But like once you get in that 10 to 13-year-old range, I like to get the kids in the gym, not lifting weights necessarily, just control your body weight, push-ups, pull-ups, dips, body weight squats, lunges. I think just developing that coordination, that proprioceptive awareness, that inter and intramuscular coordination through moving the body. When they get to 15, if we don't have to teach them that, if we can just teach squatting the way that I teach squatting to an 18 or a 21-year-old athlete, because they already have those foundational movements down, then we can really accelerate the career. You know what I mean? Whereas when I get a kid that shows up at 16, that's cool. Like we can do a lot with that. That's still a young enough age. But if you were here at 13, we could really cover a lot of bases so that when you're 16, we can take the training wheels off and go,
Oh, dude, I agree with that so much. One of my girls, she's still semi-professional. She's on her way. And she's playing tennis, and she started training with me when she was about, I'd say 10. And, we had her just doing sort of very basic movements, just squatting and even benching and deadlifting. But it was very much, usually push-ups, but we usually had her sort of just slowly building up, making sure she had the stability. She was just squatting with a dumbbell, like a goblet squat, and slowly build her up. And then by the time she was like 11, she was able to squat with the bar. And then by the time she was 12, she was squatting her body weight, with the bar.
Nice. Yeah.
Amongst other things as well, there was a lot to that puzzle. But, I just talked to her recently. I interviewed her, and she said that one of the things that really helped her a lot was the fact that she did all that earlier on. So now that she's getting these strength and conditioning programs from her coaches in Tennis Australia, that she actually is able to sort of do stuff that the other girls aren't able to do. And it's just that to her said that just puts her ahead now. Like it really matters. Like she's now stronger than everyone else, and we both know what that means. So it's just like
absolutely. And coaches notice that too, right? Like especially in football, the coach will notice the athletes that are putting the work in the gym from a young age and say, hey, that's the type of person we want on our squad. I think it's a big thing. And I have like Josh Page, who I train now. He's been with me. He turned 15 a couple months ago. He started when he was like 12 or 13 years old, and a lot of sled work, a lot of body weight stuff. But now he's 15. He deadlifted 365 off the floor like a joke. You know what I mean? He's got 16-inch arms. Like he's just a monster. And I really think it's because he's put in 3 years of, high rep band work, bear crawls, push-ups, pull-ups, dips, stuff like that, just the body weight mastery exercises. And then, we get his teammates in who don't look anything like him because they've never lifted a weight in their life. And it's like, okay, well, Josh is going to go over here and squat 315 today, and you can go goblet squat because you have to learn how to move properly, right? If you would have came earlier, we could have knocked that out of the park and been right where Josh is. So I think it's crucial to start early.
Yeah, man. And you sort of see that with I think sports any sport really. I mean, if you've got some kid that's actually been playing sport compared to some kid that's never played sport, and they come in, they're going to be two different animals. Let alone if they've been playing sport, they've been doing some strength and conditioning, and then you get some other kid that's been playing just sport. They come in, they are two different people, man. It's just this is
absolutely,
100%. Like, so if we got some kid, he's going to walk into your gym, and you agree to train him, what would the process be like to get him set?
So the first thing we're going to do is look at how he breathes. We're going to look at his BOLT score, body oxygen level test, which is a test of your body's CO2 tolerance. We find that most athletes, most people in general, are chronic overbreathers. They're dumping too much CO2. That CO2 is like the thermostat in the body that tells hemoglobin to release oxygen to tissue so that it can be oxygenated. Without that CO2 in the system, the oxygen never leaves the hemoglobin. So that's why we feel breathless, right? So we teach them how to breathe. We teach them they need to be breathing through their nose, teach them to keep their mouth closed, teach them things like jaw and tongue posture. And then from there, the first thing we need to build is usually work capacity. Usually these kids can't even get through the warm-up in the first workout. You know what I mean? It takes them 65 minutes.
Could I cut you off? What is John Tom posture?
So there's a proper way to have your mouth closed. That's gonna when you're it speaks to, like, we talk about like 13-year-old kids needing braces, and generally that's because they're mouth breathers. The mouth hangs open and the teeth grow in crookedly. When the mouth is closed properly, you have a force exerted by the cheeks in on the teeth. You have a force exerted by the tongue out on the teeth, and that helps keep the teeth straight. It helps grow a wider, bigger jaw, which allows for bigger airways when they mature. So the tongue posture is just making sure that you can have your mouth closed and have your tongue on the base of your mouth, but that's not technically correct jaw posture, right? You would want to have your tongue in the position it is when you say it, like an N sound, right, from the alphabet. You kind of want the tip of the tongue behind the bottom teeth, and then you want it to arch up and touch the roof of the mouth, and then flat to the back of the mouth. And you want the teeth touching lightly, but you don't want to clench your jaw. So just all these different, and it depends when they come in, it depends what their jaw is like, right? If they're looking at me with their mouth open, then I'm going to explain why you can't have your mouth open. If their mouth is closed, but they're super clenched up and stressed out, then I'm going to explain to them why they can't do that. But the breathing, like, it just seems axiomatic to me that if you're not breathing properly, then there's nothing else that we can do that's going to help you until we do that. You know what I mean? I think that's got to be we got to go for the low hanging fruit first, and that is the lowest of the low. If we can improve that, then everything else becomes a little bit easier.
Wow.
So yeah, we start with that, and then we get into the work capacity piece.
All right, let's hear about it.
So our warm up, which I guess we've become famous or infamous for, I don't know, but it's a dynamic based warm up. I have 10 yards marked out in the runway. You go down and back with everything, and it's brutal. It's not. I used to be the coach that was really excited about, hey, I have the hardest warm up anyone has, blah, 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 come try it, try to survive it. I've kind of, especially like through the COVID lockdown, kind of redefined what we're trying to do with this warm up. I still want it to be a challenge. I want it to be difficult. I think the warm up has to be the hardest part of the workout. But I don't think we need to sacrifice position or proper mechanics in order to get it done fast, which is kind of what it became. With the best of intentions, I just have a gym full of super competitive athletes that when I put a timer on, they want to finish this warm up in 12 minutes and beat the other group. You know what I mean? So we cleaned those things up, but just a dynamic warm up, a lot of things like butt kicks, skipping, hopping, jumping, lunges, traveling push-ups, bear crawls, inchworms, crab walks, just exposing them to a plethora of movements. It would almost look like a gymnastics class if you walked in on the warm up. And that seems to be the biggest thing to push the work capacity for new athletes is when you can get through this warm up in an hour, then we know you're getting into better shape. And it's usually first session will be about an hour, 10 minutes. Second session will take about 45 minutes. Third session, they're down to about 30 to 40 minutes. And then within the second week, usually they can finish the warm up and start the beginner workouts that we do.
Wow. So you're saying it takes them about an hour or so to do just the warm up, or is that the warm up?
If they can get to it. Sometimes they just quit. Sometimes they get halfway through the warm up, like, man, this ain't for me. And I respect that. And then we mark them on the wall and we throw them out.
And then, like, all right, so how does that go for their kind of like mental? I mean, that must help their mental capacity, because they must be like, either they quit altogether, or they just persevere and then earn their way into the gym.
Yeah, it's a huge, and then not many people quit. Like, it's happened, but it's not a very regular thing.
The thing that happens no matter what, to be honest.
Yeah,
like if you just had them do next to nothing, they'll quit.
Yeah, there's always going to be those people, right? But what tends to happen the most is I see a kid who gets about 3/4 of the way through the warm up, and you can see the look in their eyes, and they're like, "What am I doing here? Why is this guy with head tattoos yelling at me?" And I'm scared. But they get through that, and then all of a sudden, there's this confidence. You know what I mean? And there's something to be said for, you've got a gym full of kids and athletes who also did their first warm up, and they remember very well. You know, and every time someone's there doing their first warm up, all the other athletes are like, "Oh, I remember my first day, I did this and I did that." And, you know, it creates this community around it. So it's akin to like getting jumped into a gang, you know what I mean? Without the violence and shit. But like, you survive that warm up, and now you're part of a community where, like, well, we suffer together. We know what this means, and it's a special bond that exists.
Yeah, you proved yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
100%. So, man, I love that, man. I really do. I think that's...
I think it was Dan John that said, make the warm up the workout, or make the warm up harder than the workout. I can't remember which, but that just stuck in my head as a brilliant, you're going to be fatigued when you play your sport. So let's pre-fatigue with the warm up, obviously to varying levels, depending what the goal of the day is, but let's pre-fatigue with the warm up, and then let's see how athletic you can be in this semi-fatigued or completely fatigued state, depending how hard we want to push it, you know?
Yeah. It's definitely looking at. I mean, the usually the the cardio aspect usually is either the session or after the bulk of the session. It's not usually what gets the most showtime really,
Yeah.
or it's not really prioritized, or it's definitely not
Yeah.
done before the bulk of the session, and this is for you guys every time they come in regardless.
Yeah, so every time, like an athlete that's signed up with us and is a consistent athlete, they're going to come through the door. They're going to start on their CARS routine, controlled articular rotations, again, borrowing from Dr. Spina's FRC system. CARS first, and then we have our Big Five, which borrows from Stuart McGill's Big Three neutral spine core exercises. I just built on that and added 2 diaphragmatic breathing exercises to help remind the brain how to engage the diaphragm so we can brace properly and breathe properly throughout the workout. So CARS Big Five, we get into a quick like express pails rails activation mobility session, 30-second stretch, 10 contract, 10 contract, a couple times through that. Then we're into our strength prep where we're going to sneak in. It's either a good chance to sneak in some extra mobility work or sneak in some extra volume where needed. So it might be, if it's mobility work, it'll be like a wrist extension stretch for a minute or an ankle extension stretch for a minute, or it might be 100 pinch grips with the clips and get your forearms fired up a bit before we start, just targeting weak points or things that get neglected a lot. And then after the strength prep, we'll do some type of breathing primer with breath holds, and then we're into the warm up. Nice. So our pre workout routine is about 15 to 20 minutes. But it's really, that's post COVID lockdown. Pre-COVID lockdown, it was CARS Big Five, let's get into the warm up. Yeah. And the thing that I was struggling with is I felt like we were going from 0 to 60 way too fast. I wanted to stretch that out. I wanted to ease them into the warm-up. Warm-up still being the most difficult part, but I want to ease you into that a little bit more. And I think it's the breathing primer that has made the biggest impact, because now the warm-up is like my athletes feel more energized after the warm-up than they did before it now. Like, it's the craziest thing.
So this has gone down a different path than I was anticipating, but could you give us an idea of this breathing primer? I need to know about this.
So the BOLT score is where you have to start everything out. That's our diagnostic tool, right? So we get this BOLT score, and then from there we can tell what exercises you need in order to improve this. So the way that you perform the BOLT score is you take inhale through the nose, exhale through the nose. On the exhale, you pinch the nose and hold your breath till you get the first sign of air hunger. So that might be your brain saying, hey, you need to breathe now. It might be your throat contracting. It might be your stomach diaphragm contracting. But at that first sign, unplug the nose, stop the timer, resume breathing, record that time. You want to repeat that 3 to 5 times, find an average of those 3 to 5 times. And then depending on what that number is, we can tell how good of a breather you are. So if you're under 10 seconds, I'll let you in the gym, but you're just going to sit on the table and breathe because I'm worried that if you do the warm up, you'll die if you're under 10 seconds. Like, your tolerance to CO2 is non-existent, right? If you're that 10 to 20 second, then that's generally where I see strength athletes start out at. I'll let you do the warm up and do level 1 stuff, but we're not going to lift heavy weights because I'm worried about the strain on your heart from rising that blood pressure, right? 20 to 30 seconds tends to be the average where I see most athletes come into the gym using that low 20s. I'm okay with training in that range, but understand that we need to push that higher. The overarching goal of the breathing program is to have a 40-second bolt for 6 months continuous. At that point, we know that you can efficiently make use of the carbon dioxide in your system. Your body's going to expel excess carbon dioxide, not just what it perceives as excess, but what is actually excess, because you can tolerate enough carbon dioxide. Because at a certain point, you do want to get rid of that stuff, right? It's just if you're under 40 seconds and dumping CO2, then you're just not using the oxygen that's in your system, right? People tend to think that the brain is monitoring oxygen levels in the body, but really it's monitoring CO2 levels. Right? The oxygen levels are always 95 to 99% saturation in the blood, assuming the person is healthy. If it's below that, you need to get to the hospital quick, right? But it's the CO2 levels that are going to dictate how oxygenated your tissues are. So take that BOLT score, and then the main exercise that we do is called breathe light to breathe right. So what we're trying to do is lower your overall breathing volume, trying to quiet your breathing, and just trying to get you into a more CO2 tolerant state. So it's just a 10-minute, really simple exercise, hand on the chest, hand on the stomach. Be aware of your breathing, feel the stomach rise, feel the chest rise. And then every breath you take, try to take a little bit smaller breath till you build to what we call a medium level air hunger. So it's going to be, I don't want to say a panicky feeling, but it's not comfortable to have a medium level air hunger. And you just kind of sit with that for 10 minutes, try to maintain that breathing volume. And that 10 to 12 minutes is going to be the reset for the brain, right? It takes 10 to 12 minutes to reset that CO2 sensor in the brain. So we hit the breathe light to breathe right, hopefully the effects on the brain from that last for the next few hours, and you maintain that breathing volume. Then we'll hit that, I say 4 to 6 times a day, we hit that breathe light drill. And then generally within 2 to 3 weeks, we see athletes, if they were under 20, they're up over 20. And if they were over 20, but under 30, then they're getting close to 40 within 2 to 3 weeks. So it's been a pretty, sorry, go ahead.
What do you think the difference between an athlete that's hitting, like, I think you said 3 to 5 seconds is kind of like the low bar, or whatever it was. And then, if you're hitting up that top end, what's the difference between those two athletes, in your opinion, and performance-wise?
So it never really fails. The guy like Josh, the kid I talked about earlier, he has the highest bolt in our gym. He has what did he send me yesterday? It's damn near a 2-minute bolt score. Like, he'll exhale, hold his breath for 2 minutes and not have an urge to breathe, right? And he tends to be the winner in if any type of carry event, any type of max effort with the other kids. You know what I mean? He's always lifting the heaviest. He's moving the fastest. Doesn't necessarily jump the highest because we have some ankle range of motion restrictions, and he's just being young. I think he just lacks that explosive power. We need to develop that. But in every other facet, he usually comes in first. The kid with the bolt just below him usually comes in second. Like, we just see this direct correlation where the best athletes in our gym have the highest bolts. Whether even before we were doing bolts, if we would have done a bolt then, we would have found the best athlete in the gym had the highest bolt. So I see that direct correlation between where when your bolt goes up, your athleticism improves. The goal is 40. I think once you're over 40, the difference between 2 minutes and 40 seconds, at least for what we're doing, is negotiable. It's cool that he got there, but do we need to push to that level? No, right? It's anyone over 40 can compete with Josh in any breathing heavy type of GPP movement. He's still going to win because it's better. But if I can get a football player at 40, I'm beyond happy with that.
Yeah. Wow. Well, that's pretty cool. So that's new. That's the first time hearing about that.
That's from a book called The Oxygen Advantage by Patrick Mccown. If anyone's interested, he's got an Instagram page as well. A lot of great content. I would really suggest looking into that for any coaches out there. Like I said, that's just the lowest hanging fruit, right? I don't care how much you stretch. I don't care how much you lift. If you're not breathing properly, we can go for weeks without food, days without water, but only minutes without air, and seconds for some of us, right? So I think we need to take care of that piece first.
Yeah, man, 100%. That stands to reason, I suppose. I have heard about guys like into balloons and whatnot before actually competing, and that supposedly is sort of helping the oxygenation, or even just I've actually heard something to do with just the power output or whatever is just a lot greater. Yeah, I haven't really given it a great deal of sort of thought myself. Sometimes I'm just trying to get my head around basic stuff still. So
yeah, that was my COVID lockdown project. I did the breathing stuff with Patrick Mccown. I did some baseball centered stuff with Eric Cressy, studying his work, and those were my two. I wanted to improve on those areas first and foremost through lockdown, and I took advantage of that. But there's definitely a lot more that I have to learn about that stuff too. Yeah. But it's exciting. The breath work is. The last time I was that excited about finding something in training was when I found West Side Barbell. So I think this is really the big key to taking the next step in our programming.
So what would let's say in season, what would a regular program look like for you guys?
So it's going to depend on the athlete and their sport. For football is my main sport, American style football. So for those guys in the off season, I'll see them anywhere from 4 to 6 days a week, depending on how often they want to come in. There's still the program is 6 days a week, but they may only be in the gym for 4 days with 2 days that they'll do at home. Cause the 2 days are kind of optional. It's an arm care day and a leg care day, just mobility heavy, and some control stuff. But usually when we get into the season, a lot of times in the private sector, I just lose the athlete when they get into the season because between school and football and homework, and they just don't have time for training. But for those committed athletes that stick with me, usually it's 2 to 3 sessions a week. Emphasis on speed work, dynamic effort work. I treat the football game that they're going to play at the end of the week as the max. That's also why we do our maxes on Saturdays, because most of my football players play on Saturdays. So we do our heavy lower body max on that day so that your body gets into that rhythm of, okay, on this day I'm going to blow my asshole out and I got to be ready to go. So we just eliminate that Saturday because that's their game day. We'll do 2 speed days, an upper lower day, and then a mobility kind of restoration performance recovery day. And then we can add more in as needed. We could add in some connective tissue work. Obviously, this would be going into this season, would be the first season where I have the understanding of the breathing program. So I would push that a lot. But I think really pull back on at least the heavy lifting, and I think we still need to lift. We need to get that activation, move the fluid around. But the focus becomes more on not so much gaining in anything, but just trying not to lose things, right? If we can get ahead a little bit, that's great. But as long as we're not losing, whether it's strength or your cardiorespiratory fitness, whatever it is, as long as we're not losing ground, then I'm happy.
Yeah, and so do you have anything? Do you have any sort of heavy work during the season, or is it mostly just stuff to help you maintain, or even and just try to boost performance on the weekend?
For the younger athletes, there's no heavy lifting in season. I just don't want to risk the injury. You have like that residual fatigue from practicing and playing, and that's going to affect their ability to be tight under a heavy squat. And I don't want to see like a tweaked back, in season, because you're going to miss a week or two for that, and that's a shitty thing. For my pro guys, for my CFL players, they might come in on a bye week and say, hey, I want to hit a lift. Like they want to go because this is supposed to be game day and the body needs that input. But outside of that, like if they're playing a game that week, then these are grown men we're talking about, so they're going to do what they're going to do. But I would really advise against the heavy lifting. I would rather see them take submaximal weights, maybe for a little higher volume, as opposed to increasing the intensity, just to save the nervous system a bit. But my focus, if I'm programming for the athlete, is just really on recovery, restoration, and just maintaining what we spent all off season building.
Right, there you go. Listen, there's so much more I want to talk to you about. So I've got to get to work I've got to get in the gym in about half an hour.
Yeah.
And I still got to pack up and all this sort of good stuff. So, man, there's some, there's so much.
We ain't even scratched the surface yet, bro.
Bro, and I'm just like, you are doing my head in with all this stuff, and I just want to ask you more, but I'm just like,
Hey man, we can always get another episode. That's all good. I'm always available.
We're gonna have to, I think, because I want to talk to you about your off-season program now, because I think that'd be fascinating, especially once you actually do get to implement it.
Mm-hmm.
You haven't had a chance yet since learning all this stuff you just learned. And
well, actually, I have a pro lacrosse guy who his training camp for them is November. So we're training. His hope is that will happen. That's still up in there whether or not it will. But I am applying my off-season program to someone right now with great results. I'm really pumped about it. I hope he gets this season because this guy's going to be a monster. But yeah, no, it's definitely come end of January, November, when I get the pro football guys on this. I'm excited to see. Like, I think Mike is going to pull 1,000 pounds on the trap bar. I think Jake is going to squat 700. Like, we got some monsters.
Whoa.
Jake squatted 600. We're only lifting twice a week right now, so it's I'm excited for it.
Man. So yeah, all right. So that's gonna be really cool. So what would you say is the biggest mistake you see guys making in the gym?
I think to come back to the earlier point, I think if you're overlooking breathing with your athletes, then I think you're just missing a big piece. And it's not, you can get away with it, because I did for years. I made athletes better without helping them breathe better. But now that I have the knowledge, I kind of kick myself for feeling like, we beat our head against the wall a lot of times. Even take it away from think about cardiorespiratory fitness. Think about mobility, right? We get someone in a couch stretch and they're really tight through the front of their hip. Well, before I would just say, well, just breathe, just get through that pain. Just suck it up. It's pain. You can deal with it. But now we have this breathing practice where I can say, hey, why don't you try to breathe through your nose? Try to breathe into that really tight spot and exhale the tightness. You know what I mean? And we can, through that, you can engage, you can get a little bit more range of motion through the joint, get deeper into the stretch, just learning to relax through breathing and kind of govern your body through breathing, whether it's your parasympathetic response or if it's just tightness in a muscle or in tissue that you're trying to stretch, right? Understanding that breathing is the key that can unlock a lot of things for you is I think a really crucial thing. And I think if you're overlooking that just to squat heavy, then we're missing something in there.
100%. I suppose good analogy for that might be it's a bit of a paradigm. If you go further out from that, and we could say you got your sprint coach and he's got his athlete only ever sprints, and initially makes good results, and then eventually program after program, and eventually it's just like, okay, we're plateauing, but it keeps trying to smash them with more sprints, and then never actually thinks, maybe we should work on the foundations more. Maybe we should get this person a little stronger, and then therefore, start to see progress again. And I think that's kind of what you're saying. He's like, if you just sort of went even more closer to the roots, even, and so really, sort of working on something as basic as breathing, that then we actually start to see that, affect up the chain.
Absolutely, yeah. And the benefits we can see from improved breathing, like in terms of heart health or liver kidney function, your ability to digest food, ability to reduce stress, like reduce panic attacks if you suffer from that. Just all these things. It just blows my mind that it's something that no one is really talking about. But I'm glad that I found it.
Would you say the best thing to improve that is just by practicing that? And practicing
the breathing part?
Yeah.
It comes down to being aware of what you're doing. Like, a lot of people are mouth breathers because they don't realize their mouth fell open. You know what I mean? So it's a conscious thing. Like, when you do notice you're breathing through your mouth, close it and breathe through your nose. And then just remind your brain that noses are for breathing and mouths are for eating. You know what I mean? And at first you're going to catch yourself 100 times in a day breathing through your mouth. And then the next day it's going to be 50 times and it goes back every time. But it's just a conscious awareness of what's going on within your body. And I think that speaks to like society as a whole, because we're really obsessed with what's going on outside of us and within our phones, but no one's really paying attention to what's happening inside the body. And, we see all these issues with mental health and all around the whole world, especially here in Canada. And I'm like, man, if we would just slow down and breathe for a minute, we could probably solve a lot of these problems,
Very true. Very true. So if you were to practice that breathing routine, how often would you do that? And then for how long?
So I get a bolt score daily for my athletes. Unless they're over 40 seconds, then it's 2 to 3 times a week. Like for Josh, it takes like 10 minutes to do his bolt score. So you don't have to waste 10 minutes every day. I know you're good. But we get a daily bolt score. You do your breathe light to breathe right, which is just, they do that on their own at home kind of thing, 4 to 6 times per day for 10 minutes at a time. And I can tell if you're doing that or not because your bolt score will move. You know what I mean? And it's like your bolt score will snitch on you is what I tell all my athletes. Like, you got this 19-second bolt for 3 weeks. You're not doing shit. I don't care what you're saying you're doing. Right. Yeah. So breathe light to breathe right throughout the day. And then we'll work in, you have to have over a 30-second bolt in order to do the simulated high altitude training stuff that we do. But we'll work in things like dynamic breath holds, pre-training. Sometimes we'll do the breath holds during the warm-up. Sometimes we'll do what we call a CO2 test, where you take 3 big breaths in and out through your nose and then a 4th big inhale, and try to make that exhale last as long as possible on one consistent exhale. I find that's a great primer and another great test to in place of the bolt score. You know what I mean? If you're not finding consistent findings with that, you could try this CO2 test and use that as a data point. And, Wim Hof stuff, I haven't done a ton of diving into Wim Hof, but that's a name that keeps popping up as a great pre-training breathing regimen to go through. I think they do their breathe light at home, but outside of that, I want to do the breath hold stuff within the supervision of the gym, because I want to know that you're safe while you're doing it, right? Like, I don't want you to pass out and hurt yourself, which hasn't happened yet, and I doubt that it would, but just in the interest of safety, come do it at the gym.
100%.
But it's something like you practice it all day, right? We breathe all day unconsciously, I think it's time we start paying attention and make it a more conscious effort.
I love it, man. That's good. So let's sort of zoom out. And really zoom out here. I want to sort of understand what's going on. What would you do? How would you design a program, just like an overview of a program for a soccer player, let's just say, because I think soccer is not a bad sport, because I think if you make a few adjustments, you can sort of start to make it more similar for other sports. How would you design a year schedule for a soccer player? Like, what would you be doing in the off season? What would you be doing in the on season, and so forth?
So hopefully we're starting in the off season, because I hate starting with athletes in season. That's the worst case scenario. So for the sake of this, let's say it's off season. Obviously we're hitting the breathing, we're hitting the work capacity stuff first and foremost. From there, soccer is interesting, because I don't necessarily think soccer is a sport where having a higher 1 rep max is going to help you with anything. But what we might do for a max effort movement with a soccer player is say, okay, here's 135 on the bar. How many times can you squat this in a minute? And then we'll come back 6 weeks later and see, did you get more reps this time? Did you get fewer reps? Where are we at with that? Similar to deadlifting or things on the belt squat. I think we chase that strength endurance in place of the maximal strength. we'll hit a few maxes here and there because getting stronger isn't going to hurt anything, but that's not going to be the overarching goal of the program. I think the main movements are going to be, like I said, centered more on the speed strength element on dynamic effort days, because that rate of force development is still going to matter for a soccer player. But max effort days will be subbed with some type of volume max, or some type of maybe even with the new breath hold stuff that we're doing, maybe max breath holds of some sort, right? Something to improve that cardiorespiratory function a little bit, because that's a huge part of soccer. Whereas in football, you get to recover 20 seconds to 40 seconds between every play. With the accessory work, we would try to push probably a lot of connective tissue work. I don't want to see a lot of hypertrophy for a soccer athlete, because that's more gravity to overcome while you run up and down the field. And soccer players tend to be pretty petite people as is. I don't think it's going to behoove you to be 230 pounds with a six-pack in soccer. So a lot of connective tissue work, band work, anywhere from sets of 150 to 350 reps with a light band. And a lot of focus on just general physical preparedness, I think, outside of what they do on the field. So I would have a lot of carries, like weighted carries, body weight carries like bear crawls, or fireman partner carries in a post-COVID world where we can touch each other again. And then when we get to the in-season, just maintaining that. Like, I don't think I need to take a soccer player and have them run. I think they do that enough in soccer, right? So working within the scope of what we did in the off-season, just dialing back the volume a bit, emphasizing mobility and recovery more, and cutting back the overall amount of time they're spending in the gym, obviously, because they're spending more time on the field. But yeah, I think that strength endurance piece, that connective tissue piece is going to be super important for a soccer player. Things like preventative maintenance on the feet and ankles, knees, hips, those things always get tore up real bad in soccer. So yeah, along those lines. It's interesting though. I don't have many soccer players. We have Rob works out at the gym. He owns the Athlete Collective, and both his daughters play soccer. So when you get soccer players in the gym, they usually go with Rob. But it's an interesting sport. I'd definitely love to train a soccer athlete.
Yeah, we get a few, I guess. I mean, we obviously have different sports here. We got like rugby, soccer's pretty big, rugby league, which is another type of rugby. It's just more specifically in Australia. Like, we tend to dominate that sport.
Is that what they call Aussie rules? That one?
Then we got AFL.
That's different.
Yeah, we got AFL. Okay. That's an Australian sport, and we obviously dominate that one because we're the only ones to play it.
Hey, we do that with hockey, so it's all good.
Yeah. Come now. You've at least got the US to compete against. You know what?
They think they can compete.
But actually, the Irish have this sport that's very similar. Somehow, I don't know how it happened, but very similar to AFL. They just got a different ball. They got like something like more like a handball or like a volleyball kind of thing, and but the rules are very similar. So they verse each other every year.
Yep.
And our sport is a lot more professional than their sport. And anyways, our guys versus their guys with sort of mixed rules, and they kill us every year. I don't know how that happens.
Oh, shit.
Our guys are, bro, I don't know, man. Our guys are on $1 million contracts and shit. I don't know how.
You gotta figure it out. It might be that they're doing Louis shit. Louis big in the rugby world. I know West Side, like in the Eastern world, rugby guys love Louis stuff. So
they do.
They're doing that, and your guys aren't.
That could be it. We got this team in Australia in Melbourne, called the Melbourne Storm, and they are arguably the most dominant. Probably not even arguably. I would say they're dead set the most dominant team in rugby league, which is sort of similar to rugby, just faster, and they're the most dominant. And their coach was on Louis' podcast.
Oh, really? Wow.
A couple of years ago, because obviously they're doing the West Side Method, or their version of the West Side Method, and I was like, well, that makes sense, man, because that's what West Side's kind of, it's kind of what their bragging point is for sport, is that they're ready to go at any moment. They're always prepared. They could go compete at any moment, and whereas typically what you see in sport is that teams will do really good to start with, and then they'll drop off in the middle of the year, and then they'll peak again at the end. Whereas the Storm's just like constant.
Consistent, 90%.
100% all the time, ready to go. And I was like, well, what do you expect, man? And I think the West Side Method has a lot to, however you want to follow it, if you can just sort of bear in mind that you want to be, have a high level of physical preparedness all the time. I mean, you just at least bear that much in mind, and then you'll probably will have more consistent team, throughout.
Yeah.
There won't be fatigue at certain points because you're trying to drop strength and trying to increase cardio or some crap like that,
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I don't know, man. Maybe you're right. Maybe that's what we need. Maybe teams need more West Side.
Hey, tell them they can fly me out to Australia. I'll help out. I wouldn't mind
Bruh,
visiting Australia.
I love it, man. You should come out. It's nice weather this time of year.
Someday, yeah. I'll definitely in the winter. I would, yeah. I'll get out of here in December. Come see you guys. It gets cold here,
bro. You'd have to dig your way out of your house. Yeah. Even in the dead of winter, it's I don't know. You probably won't really understand this, but it's probably only like 16 degrees, which is like I don't know what in Fahrenheit, but it's.
We're Celsius anyway. Yeah, just America is Fahrenheit.
Yeah,
okay. We're Celsius.
16 degrees. It's not bad in the dead of winter. So.
Yeah, that's your winter. We had a whole week of minus 50 last winter. Yeah,
degrees.
That shit was brutal. Yeah, and it was like I got 2 big bay doors in the gym, right? So I can't. There's no R value. The heat just goes out. So your hands freeze to the bar when you're benching or squatting or anything. I got like my CFL guys. Like Mike is from Maryland, which is like not southern states, but it's a warmer climate. Like it gets like -2, -3 in the winter. He hates it. He hates it in the winter. And this winter especially, because at least usually he has football to play in the winter, but now he's got no football. He's just training, and he's got to get up in the morning and get out in the cold. He's not happy.
That'll make you tough. That's for damn sure. All right. Yeah. So here's my final question for you. And this is a question I ask virtually, not every guest, but all of the guests that come on, and well, at least guests I think that will have a good sort of opinion on this, and I think you will. So if you had a kid, and this kid, you could raise this kid to be the greatest athlete possible, and let's just assume they are actually interested in the sport that you're going to, sort of push them towards over time. How would you raise this athlete? How would you, what steps would you take to kind of get them to the point where they could turn pro?
Can I tell you, I love this question because I have nieces and nephews who are like 2-3 years old right now, and I'm doing this in real life, except I'm not the parent, so I don't bear the responsibility. Yo, Kev, you got to do this with Kate. He's got to do this. So first thing, again, circling back to the breathing part, and Andrew Mccown talks about in the Eastern world, like in China and Japan, it's such a common practice for parents to encourage nasal breathing for their babies, right? Like if they come in and see the baby's mouth fell open while it was sleeping, they'll gently close the baby's mouth so it breathes through the nose, because you properly oxygenate the brain and you don't dump so much CO2 while you breathe, right? So you're oxygenating while you sleep. So things like that, like really pushing nasal breathing from a young age. It's really romantic and easy to say that you push. I don't know how you do that with a 4-year-old that's going to fight you on it, but that's not my problem. I'm not the parent. I'm just the uncle. So, yeah, push the nasal breathing, get them into the really good early exposure sports like dance, martial arts, gymnastics, some type of well-structured strength conditioning where, you have a coach that knows what they're doing with the younger kid. They're not just going to load up a bar and you're squat now, right? Like there's a path they have to follow. But early introduction to sports, I would have them avoid sitting as much as possible. Like we'd have all standing workstations in the house or wherever we go. And just that consistent, like understanding the process of being successful beyond just lifting weights and training, you know what I mean? Understanding that it takes time, it takes patience. I think there's a lot of things that we do for our athletes that we can't put on a business card and say, we'll do this for you. But there's a lot of life lessons and things that you'll learn, not just in my gym, but in any gym, because that's what lifting does for people. Like there's so many life lessons that we can teach and learn from that. So I would think that's probably outside of the breathing part, that's the most important thing, is to utilize that time with that young athlete to teach those lessons so that when they're 16, 17 and don't want to listen to you anymore, at least they have these guiding principles that they can follow and hopefully achieve their goals,
Yeah, 100%. So I want to dive into maybe a little bit more detail. Would say on the athletic side of things, is there any sort of path you think might or physical development sort of side of things? How would you sort of go down? What path would you kind of think would be more idealistic for a kid to go down? Would it be something like gymnastics, kind of moving into whatever it might be sort of further down the track? Like how would you sort of send the kid?
Yeah, I love gymnastics as the starting point because I
Mm.
think all sports is physical problem solving, and we just vary the speed at which we solve those problems at. But gymnastics is a really great, like not necessarily competitive gymnastics, but just being in the gym with gymnasts and learning your body. It's real physical problem solving at its most basic. Do you understand what a stable shoulder is in an overhead position? Yes or no? Well, can you do a handstand? If you can, then yes, you do. If you can't, then no, you don't. So it's this really great base level to learn from. I think dance and martial arts do the same things. But yeah, then from there, it's much easier to take them down that path and have reap the benefits of something like the bench press or the squat or the deadlift or a push up, because they have these fundamental patterns and principles ingrained in them from the young age.
Mm.
So I would have them start, like if it's my kid, I would probably start with gymnastics. I think that would be the best of the three options because there's so much exposure to movement. And then probably around 10 years old to 12 years old, a lot of band work, a lot of sled work, a lot of body weight stuff. Just learn how to hold your body up and control your body. And then when we get to that 13, 14 years old, now we can start to incorporate some dumbbells, some different more advanced sled work, prowler work, stuff like that. And then when we hit 15, 16, now we can really start loading up the heavy weight and throwing shit around and see what we can do.
Mm. I love that answer, man. So I love your initial answer too, because I really love that initial answer too, because I think it's something that's kind of overlooked, some of those small things, but actually do make the biggest sort of impact. Uh, Andrew Locke gave a really interesting answer. He sort of started off saying, let your child crawl for as long as you could possibly let them crawl for. Don't pick them up. Don't let them try to walk early. Just let them crawl for as long as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And he's just like the hand, like your bilateral movements improve quite a lot.
Yeah,
Core strength is improving quite a lot in that process as well. And I thought that was quite interesting. And
that's a way better answer. I should have said that shit.
right.
Does that go back to the DNS system? Is that what he's talking about?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
but we can't all be Andrew Luck. It's just
No,
give us time.
he's brilliant, man.
Give us time, bro.
I hope someday. That's a goal to reach for. I hope to be
Right.
as smart as Andrew Locke someday.
You and me both, man. I just hope to be half as smart as Andrew Luck. That
Yeah.
guy's a genius. And then
If I could just know what he forgot.
oh yeah, bro. The one other one I've heard in the past as well, which kind of goes along with that, was don't put your kid in those jumpy things where you sort of like they're in a harness and they can't fall over and they're kind of just like walking, or those little things where it's like a harness and they can walk around their house and
it kind of holds them up.
And it holds them up and they got like a little desk in front of them or whatever.
Oh,
and
yeah.
And I heard something. I think it was do you know who Paul Check is?
Yeah. Paul Check was at Swiss both years that I was there. I didn't talk to him, but
Really?
he was there. I know the name. Yeah.
That guy is a controversial but very interesting man.
He's kind of in that Charles Poliquin kind of vein in my mind. Like some of the stuff that Charles would say, I was like, really, man? Like, you don't want to chew gum? But some of it is just utterly brilliant.
Oh yeah.
I don't know much about Paul, but yeah, he kind of struck me as like that type of coach.
Yeah. The way I kind of understand Paul is that he's like Poliquin, but kind of more organic and nature-esque kind of guy, functional, if you will. And then Poliquin's more like hardcore, kind of like more kind of like, I don't know, I wouldn't say meathead kind of guy, but he's definitely more like into the performance side of things, let's say.
Yeah, and he would do anything to get an advantage and to get better, to the point where I thought it was a little bit crazy, but hey, to each their own, And
right, he almost killed
athlete.
himself. Like he almost killed himself in the process of trying to figure out how to get better. Like I think Poliquin, I think he took like massive amounts of vitamin C or something like that. And
I didn't hear this story.
This is just hearsay, so don't quote me completely, because I've heard it from a guy. So let's just put that out there. But I'm pretty sure the story sounds legit because it was a pretty good source. And then he's basically like I think it was a mass amount of vitamin C, and then they had to give him an adrenaline shot to bring him back, because it is like, and as soon as he gets brought back, he's like, he gets over to his notepads like, no, that didn't work. But anyways, Poliquin was like, one of the things. Sorry, not Poliquin.
Paul Chek
was saying is that, you know, those walkie chair things that you put kids in, that doesn't allow your child's feet to develop.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And because you need to allow them to graduate from crawling to standing in a very gradual manner, and then once they got stability on their feet, then they'll, you know, get themselves to walk, and then when they're ready to walk, they will. But to try to get them to walk before they can, you know, crawl well, even, because that's kind of what happens, you know, their feet don't develop all that well. And he says this is kind of the pathway to having flat feet, which I thought
that's brilliant. I'd never thought of it in that light before, but that is brilliant.
Yeah.
And I guess in that vein, if I'm thinking in that vein, things that I would want to avoid in a kid is like wearing high-heeled shoes, shortening that heel cord, because we see a ton of that. Like we're seeing, you know, we have a global pandemic of coronavirus, but we also have a pandemic of torn Achilles in the NFL and CFL and in major sports, and torn ACLs. So yeah, you know, back to Paul Chek's point about weak feet, I think that your connection to the physical world is what's going to help stabilize the body. And if that foot collapses in, then we're going to see a lot of collapse upstream of that and a lot of compensation pattern. So things like staying out of high-heeled shoes, staying out of shoes as much as possible. Just get barefoot. Let your foot be a foot. All our athletes train in socks. We'll allow shoes if you want to, but like all the other athletes will make fun of you if you wear shoes. Things like that. And the nasal breathing, I think, plays a big part in that. I think avoiding the amount of the junk food that's out there, the fast food, and that's kind of axiomatic, and it's tough for stressed out parents to cook a fresh meal for their kids every day. But if the more you can avoid that shit, I think is going to be a big service to the kid to become an athlete later in life.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. You know, I just saw this graph yesterday where they had a kid eating processed food which had similar macronutrients to a whole food. The person eating the processed food saw, I think it was like something like 10 or 20% less progress than the person eating whole food, like, you know, just like a steak as opposed to like a burger or something like that.
Yeah, even though the macronutrients were the same.
Yeah, which is quite interesting. I'm not sure what to make of that, but, you know, that's something at least to take into mind. And you know, maybe if if you're going between the steak and the burger, bro, maybe just go the steak, you know. I mean, maybe that's just the difference.
Yeah, I think, like, I'm reading Geraldo Guevara, I think is his name, the Sapiens, that book right now. And I think that would kind of feed back to the idea of, like, the processed food may have the same macronutrients, but we're just not evolved to be able to take those macronutrients from that processed food as we are from a more whole food source. You know, I feel like we're just closer to our ancestors if we're eating, you know, clean whole foods as opposed to a quarter pounder from McDonald's kind of thing. But yeah, I'm no nutrition expert. I don't claim to be that, but
no, I feel that too, man. I whenever my kids kind of come up with questions, I tend to give them a broad overview, but definitely recommend them on to someone else who knows more than me. Because
we'll do the basics, but I refer out for anything beyond that for sure.
Yeah, I don't know about you, man, but I kind of draw a line. I'm just like, listen, I'm the strength and conditioning coach. Every time I try to delve into something like nutrition, I always get worse at being a strength and conditioning. And you know, that's where I draw a line. I'm just like, no, I'm just this guy. You go see that guy. You know, I can give you some advice, some general advice, but nothing specific.
That's such a big lesson to learn as a young coach. That's something I learned too. When I first started, I wanted to be everything. I wanted to be the guy that would fix your pain and make you strong and make you get you eating better. And you can't do everything, man. You got to have a good referral system. And I like strength. I love strength. Why would I, you know, that's what's fun about it. So I'm happy doing what I do now. I'm glad that I figured that out as well.
Yeah, I think as a young strength and conditioning coach, you got a lot of insecurities. You think you got to prove yourself and be everything to everyone. And, but time will tell you that that's not the case, and you just got to be confident in sending them to someone else, and understanding that that's actually going to make them more loyal to you because you did that, you know. So is there anything I didn't ask you about I should have asked you about in this podcast?
No, I mean, unless you want to go for another couple hours, we could talk about everything. But I was like the one of the best formatted podcasts that I haven't done a ton, but no, this has been great. I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, and you know what? If I'd known that you're gonna be dropping bombs like this, I would have just been like taking out an entire day for this. But, you know what? This will be good. We'll get you back on, and then we'll go again. And
Absolutely, man. Anytime.
bro, could you quickly drop all your social medias and whatnot where these guys can find you?
Yeah, for sure. We're on Instagram at eats.sg, on Facebook, Facebook Elite Athlete Training Systems. I don't do Twitter. I'm not cool enough for that. Website, eliteathletetrainingsystems.com or eats.com. But yeah, if you any questions or anything, DM me. Sometimes it takes a while to answer, but I try to answer whatever questions athletes or coaches may have and open that dialogue. And yeah, no, this is great. I really appreciate the opportunity to spread my message here.
Welcome, bro. And I gotta say that's quite legit, because I remember when I first found out about Brad and what he was doing at his gym. I was doing something similar at my gym, like just in my own style, because we were sort of going down this sort of trend of doing West Side. And then I had to ask him questions about this because he was more qualified than I was, and he was happy to help me out. So I appreciate that, dude.
Yeah, always happy to help the industry that helps me so much. It's a great thing.
Thanks, dude. Thanks for coming on, man. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.